Okay, good afternoon. Mayor's update from Council on July 20th. Sorry, we're a couple of weeks late with it, but busy. It's summertime, it's nice out, so things got delayed a little bit. So I'll just whip through this. 3 delegations that came to us. First one was from the Filipino-Canadian High River Association, and Eduardo Basa and Mary Joy came just to give us an update as to the money that we gave them with their community grant and what they were doing with that money and how well they're doing with it. So that was a quick update. They gave us a little thank you plaque that I think everybody saw in the High River Times. But another one was from the Riverbend Campground just outside of Okotoks, and Mr. Gerard Herman, who runs that campground, is just looking at adjusting some of the rules as to how long people can stay in his campground and those kinds of things. And it does affect kind of how George Lane operates as well. So he just wanted to bring that to us. They're very minor changes, not a big deal at all. So he's just asking for a letter of support from us. So we put it back to him. You send us what details you'd like us to put in this letter. We'll decide whether we're going to say yes or no to it, and I'm sure everything will be fine, but that's just all that happened there. The big one that came was Axia Netmedia. Now, I know everybody's seen a lot in the newspapers recently of other communities like Vulcan and Nanton that are getting fiber optics networks put in. We've been dealing with this for full-on 2 years now. It started out with TELUS, came to us a year and a half or so ago, and we had some negotiations with them. It's important to note because I think a lot of people have heard back from TELUS saying that TELUS would be doing this, but Town Council doesn't want them to. That couldn't be further from the truth. There's a negotiation that happens, and we weren't going to be bullied into anything. TELUS is more than welcome to come in here and put fiber in, but not at the expense of our community. So Shaw is currently in the ground. They're already doing stuff, servicing this building. I think this is the first video we've ever done in my office at the town, but servicing this building and putting connections into downtown High River with fiber. So fiber is already happening in High River. Now, Axia Netmedia is just another provider of this service, and they will come in and put fiber throughout the community and everything else. That's who's doing it in Vulcan and Nanton. So they came. Jason O'Connor from Axia came just to present what they do, how they do it, and what we need to do. The biggest thing with Axia for them to come into town is they need an expression of interest from the residents of High River. 30% of the residents that go on and express an interest in the service on their website. Once they hit the 30% mark, then they come in and they put the fiber in. So we're not there yet because other communities have just gotten ahead of it. Anyways, so if you go to axia.com, so AXIA.com, and click on Order Now, it does not commit you to anything. You just put your name and address in and your service requirements and click Order Now, and it doesn't mean that there's going to be a service to you tomorrow because there's no fiber to you yet. So that just gets the expression put in place is what Jason needs to get things moving forward for us. But the end of the day, fiber is already coming to High River, and all of these companies that do it, Axia, Shaw, and TELUS, our doors are wide open, but there's a negotiation that happens, and a negotiation goes 2 ways. Anyways, moving on, we did some adoption of previous minutes. There was one notice of motion that Councillor Blockland put forward that we will discuss at the August 17th regular meeting, which is in regards to election signage, where it goes, how you can do it. Is there specific spots that will allow signage rather than, there was a lot of comments. I know when we had our election, there was a lot of comments about how 12th Avenue and Centre Street and all these main corridors actually looked with all the signs that went up. So I think it's important. Doesn't mean we have to just completely cover this town in signage. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with that one. I think Okotoks has a bylaw, which is where Councillor Blockland kind of got it from, that their community looks a lot cleaner during that time. So another bylaw that came to us in regards to civic addressing, and this has also been in the High River Times already. Just putting numbers in your back fences and stuff along your laneways. This is important, and I've seen a couple of the comments that have been on social media about it. The guys that are judge and jury over everything now on Facebook, I love it. But they, think it's a waste of money and everything else. Look, it's a tiny, tiny little thing that we're asking you do, just so that emergency crews, if they have to access the back lane, it's very easy to find. That's all it is. It's another house number. Big deal. It's important. So, noise bylaw. This is just first reading to an updated noise bylaw for the town of High River. I've had a few people comment on this, and it's important that we get this updated and keep it in place. So, second, third reading will be happening in the future here. Land use bylaw amendment. This is for the Spitzee Crossing land use zoning districts. And there was a lot of conversation because this came to us at a previous council meeting, but we didn't quite have all the information. And the one thing that I didn't know for myself is that these land use districts were already in the Spitzee Crossing area structure plan that was approved in 2013. So, and we had kind of went against that, but it's not a big deal. It's a new way of doing development, which is, I think, is extremely important. And these zonings, you can't just blanket it and putting the old ones back into this thing, because it doesn't all coincide with each other. This is a little bit different, and the multi-use zoning and that is happening in Spitzee Crossing, which I completely agree with, just doesn't exist in some of the other areas. So. This is a new way of doing development. Doesn't quite fit with all the old ways. So that's why this one got first reading and scheduled into a public hearing and everything else. So you'll see more about that. But that's why it got brought back and got dealt with. Urban chickens and bees. I'm not going to talk about this one for too long because everybody's seen all the, we've talked about it more than enough, but council did approve a policy to allow chickens and bees, backyard chickens and bees in the town of High River. So the policy will be coming back to us, and we will approve that actual policy. So it's going to happen. It's just, what does the policy look like, and what are the rules in behind it, which are important. So that one's done. Okay, so the next one we dealt with was the secondary suites. Now, this is probably the biggest contentious issue that any community deals with right now. Calgary's having a heck of a time getting it dealt with, and we're no different, because there's a number of things that come into play when you're talking about secondary suites. So there was a draft policy that came to us in a report, and 3 recommendations. We weren't comfortable with any of the recommendations because we didn't see that policy being kind of where we need to go in High River. There's a number of things that affect with secondary suites that you have to really kind of pick one to decide which direction these things are going to go. And the big ones are parking, affordable housing, illegal suites, and preserving our R1 neighborhoods, that people have invested in those types of neighborhoods, and what the secondary suites look like in those neighborhoods. If you look at it strictly from what does that neighborhood look like, it's going to be very hard to approve any secondary suites, because that goes into parking. And do we want these streets, and how does that all work when it's plugged full of cars? That's the one issue. But if you look at it from the other side and you go, well, this is an extremely important part of our affordable housing initiatives and that we have to provide for affordable housing in High River, secondary suites can be a very, very valuable thing to work towards achieving a better outcome of affordable housing. But doing that increases affordable housing. It also increases parking and cars on the streets and everything else, what goes against people that don't want all the parking in the R1 neighborhoods. So I know there's been some comments of town council can't get it together and figure this out. I tell you what, this is difficult, and it's very hard to try to balance out the social programs with actually what's happening on our streets and in the neighborhoods of these communities. So it's not as easy as you think, and once you're on the decision-making end of things like we are, it becomes very difficult. So we've just brought it back. I'm actually putting a survey together that's my own survey that will be, I'm going to post onto my Facebook page, and you guys can go in there. They're my own thoughts, and I just want to gauge as to where people are on a few of these things. So I encourage you to go on there and have a look at that. So it's a tough thing, and like I said, Calgary has struggled with it for years, and it's the balance between the social needs and the actual neighborhood itself. So there'll be more on that. Lineham Acres pedestrian access. This was an issue that got brought into us because of the new Lineham canal berm along there. There used to be just a mild little ramp that came down through a couple of properties and went up onto the berm, and then you headed down Happy Trails and over to Center Street or north to the golf course. That ramp is, that berm is quite a bit higher now than it used to be, and putting a ramp in there, it would have to be a very, very long ramp that went from the berm all the way to the street, so extremely expensive. Not that that's the big deciding factor on this, but it just wouldn't work very well. So we gave the go-ahead for administration to and engineering to put a set of stairs in there. There is still excellent access from the front of Lineham around, and wheelchair access, and for scooters and bikes and all those kinds of things. There's still access there, but because of the new berm, it just didn't work to put another ramp back in there. So we're putting stairs in there to give pedestrian access as well. So that's where we went with that one. And actually from there, that was about it. Done. You'll see another video hopefully next week, right after the August 17th meeting. We'll update this again. So thank you very much.